These are 5 movie sets that Hollywood built in the desert between 1920 and 1980 and then abandoned. Buried on purpose, torched by arsonists, swallowed by migrating sand dunes, every one of them still exists in some form. And each tells a different story about what happens to a fake town when the cameras stop rolling and nobody comes back. The oldest one on this list might also be the strangest archaeological site in America. Back in 1923, Cecil B. DeMille constructed an entire Egyptian city on the sand dunes of Central California for his silent version of the 10 Commandments. This went far beyond painted backdrops. Around 1,500 carpenters spent 6 weeks raising a set that towered 120 feet tall and stretched 800 feet wide, anchored by a 110-foot gate, flanked by 4 35-foot statues of Ramses II. 21 sphinxes lined the processional avenue, each one weighing close to 5 tons. The material list alone tells you how massive this operation was, with over 25,000 pounds of nails and more than 1 million pounds of plaster, statuary, and concrete hauled onto those dunes. Famous players Lasky, the company that eventually became Paramount Pictures, bankrolled the production. The budget ballooned from $750,000 to about $1.4 million, which translates to roughly $26 million today, making it the most expensive film ever produced at that point. When the studio panicked over those overruns, DeMille turned to A.P. Giannini of the Bank of Italy, which later became Bank of America, and secured emergency financing to keep the cameras rolling. And this is where the story takes a turn. Once filming wrapped, DeMille never tore the set down or shipped it anywhere. Crews knocked the whole thing over and left it sitting in the sand for 2 reasons. His contract required returning the site to its original condition, and he also wanted to keep rival studios from reusing his massive Egyptian set for cheap knockoffs. DeMille actually wrote about this decision in his autobiography, published after his death in 1959. His exact words were, "If 1,000 years from now archaeologists happen to dig beneath the sands of Guadalupe, I hope they will not rush into print with the amazing news that Egyptian civilization, far from being confined to the valley of the Nile, extended all the way to the Pacific coast of North America. California wind handled the burial. Within a few years, the entire city vanished beneath the dunes. That's where things stood until 1983, when a film student named Peter Brosnan heard the legend over beers in Los Angeles and tracked the site down after an El Niño winter exposed chunks of Egyptian bas-relief poking through the sand. A Smithsonian-funded radar survey confirmed in 1990 that the set remained intact underground, but excavation dragged on for decades because of permitting battles and the nesting season of the western snowy plover, a threatened bird that breeds in those same dunes. October 2012 brought the first successful dig. Crews pulled out a sphinx head so deteriorated that Dune Center executive director Doug Jensen told the press it resembled blue cheese and a hollow chocolate rabbit. A far better specimen emerged in November of 2017, a nearly intact 300-pound sphinx head that still showed its original terracotta paint and the fingerprints of the artisans who shaped it a century earlier. The extraction method was pure improvisation, with surfboards lashed to plywood serving as a sled. That sphinx head now sits on public display at the Guadalupe Nipomo Dunes Center, and ground-penetrating radar has picked up at least 12 more sphinxes still buried beneath the surface. During the 1920s, locals famously carted off sphinxes to use as lawn ornaments, and 2 of them ended up flanking the entrance to the Santa Maria golf course. Southern Utah is our next stop, where a small town near the Arizona border earned the nickname Little Hollywood, starting in the 1920s. Tom Mix's Deadwood Coach in 1924 was the first confirmed production shot around Kanab, and over the following decades, more than 100 films and television shows used Kane County as a backdrop. The local Perry brothers converted their Zion guiding business into Hollywood's pipeline to the Utah desert and opened Perry Lodge in 1931. That lodge still operates today and sits on the National Register of Historic Places. Everyone from John Wayne to Frank Sinatra slept there. One resident named Theo McAllister captured what the movie business meant to Kanab when she put it this way, that it kept the kids from eating the putty out of the windows. 2 abandoned sets once stood in the area surrounding Kanab, and both have brutal stories. About 35 miles east of town, along the Paria River, sits the Paria movie set location, originally a Mormon settlement founded in the 1860s and abandoned by 1929 after repeated floods. During the summer of 1961, the production crew behind Sergeants 3, directed by John Sturgis and starring Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, built a replica frontier town about a mile from the original ruins. That film holds the distinction of being the only one to feature all 5 members of the Rat Pack. Clint Eastwood's crew reused the set in 1976 for The Outlaw Josie Wales, where it doubled as the town of Santo Rio. A 1998 flood carved a 20-foot gully through the structures, and between 1999 and 2001, BLM crews joined local volunteers to rebuild the 3 remaining buildings on more stable ground. That community effort ended on a Friday afternoon in 2006, when an arsonist burned the saloon, mercantile, post office, and an adjoining building to the ground. A witness spotted a tan, late-model pickup speeding away from the scene. Nobody was ever charged. BLM spokesman Larry Crutchfield told reporters, "The rebuilding of the set was a community effort, and it hurts the whole community. All that remains today are a dirt parking lot, pit toilets, and interpretive signs. Managed by the BLM within Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, 9 miles east of Kanab and 5 miles up Johnson Canyon Road, sits the second site. A decaying set used for roughly 20 location episodes of CBS's Gunsmoke, which ran from 1955 to 1975 across 635 total episodes. Production work at that location predates the show by decades, since films like Bad Man of Brimstone, shot there as early as 1938. The structures now occupy private, fenced-off land and have badly deteriorated from weather and neglect. One visitor wrote in 2013, "A few more storms, and they'll be gone forever." Some of the original set pieces from Kanab area productions have been relocated to the Free Little Hollywood Movie Museum in town, which photographer Tom Forsyth has operated since 2006. Old Tucson is the one entry on this list that keeps refusing to disappear, even after every reason it should have. Columbia Pictures assembled the place in just 40 days during 1939 for the Western epic Arizona. Local carpenters and Tohono O'odham workers produced roughly 350,000 adobe bricks from desert dirt, and some of those original bricks remain standing today. After sitting mostly dormant for 2 decades, entrepreneur Robert Shelton invested about $500,000 and reopened the property as a combined working studio and theme park on January 1st, 1960. Over the next 4 decades, more than 300 productions shot on those grounds. Rio Bravo, Gunfight at the OK Corral, El Dorado, Hombre, Joe Kidd, NBC's High Chaparral, Little House on the Prairie, and later Tombstone and The Quick and the Dead all used the facility. John Wayne alone starred in 4 films there. By the early 1990s, nearly 500,000 visitors passed through the gates each year, making Old Tucson, Arizona's second most visited attraction behind only the Grand Canyon. And that's when things fell apart. On April 24, 1995, a fire broke out during a Hollywood stunt demonstration and destroyed roughly 40% of the park. Between 25 and 40 buildings burned, along with the 10,000 square foot prop and wardrobe warehouse, the entire Little House on the Prairie wardrobe collection, and the only existing copy of an old Tucson historical documentary featuring behind-the-scenes footage of John Wayne, William Holden, and Angie Dickinson. Firefighters hauled 900,000 gallons of water from a hydrant 5 miles away to contain the blaze. ATF investigators suspected arson by a rejected job applicant. That case also went unsolved. Doors reopened on January 2, 1997, with 16 new buildings on the lot, but the place never fully recovered. Then CEO Pete Mangelsdorf later admitted, after the rebuild of Old Tucson following the 1995 fire, the town just didn't have the same look and feel. COVID-19 delivered the next blow. The operator terminated its lease on September 14, 2020, laying off 8 full-time and 136 seasonal employees. General Manager Terry Verhage described the decision as one made with a heavy heart, while Pima County Supervisor Ramon Valadez called the site a cultural and historic icon, not only for Pima County and Arizona, but for the country. Rescue came on April 5, 2022, when Pima County awarded a new 5-year lease to American Heritage Railways, and the park reopened on October 6th of that year. Old Tucson now runs on a strictly seasonal schedule, closing during the hottest summer months. Portions of the property remain visibly run down, with ruins of the original 1940 Mexican village walls still exposed, and a rusting train car from a Kenny Rogers film sitting along the miniature train route. The place functions as a working attraction that still feels, in certain corners, genuinely abandoned. George Lucas arrived in Tunisia during March and April of 1976 to shoot the desert exteriors for the original Star Wars, spending roughly $700,000 of the film's total $11 million budget. on the Tunisian portion alone. That $11 million investment produced a movie that grossed $530 million on its initial release. The very first day of shooting ran into Tunisia's first recorded rainstorm in 50 years. Several structures from that original shoot still survive across the country. At Chott El Djerid, a massive salt flat in southwest Tunisia, the Lars Homestead igloo took 8 weeks to build in 1976, was dismantled after filming, and then rebuilt to original specifications in 2000 for Attack of the Clones. Over in the town of Matmata, an underground Berber cave dwelling called Hotel Sidi Driss served as the Lars Homestead interior and continues to operate as a hotel, with rooms named after Star Wars characters. On the island of Djerba, in the town of Ajim, an abandoned traditional bakery doubled as the Mos Eisley Cantina exterior. $8 a day is what the owner received. That building still stands, completely unrestored. By 2010, the Chott El Djerid igloo was crumbling, with plaster falling away to expose the support beams underneath. Belgian tour guide Mark Dermel launched Save the Lars Homestead, set a fundraising goal of $10,000, and collected $11,700 from 425 donors in under 10 months. The Tunisian Revolution delayed the necessary permits until December 2011, and on May 25, 2012, a 6-person international crew spent 3 days working in 110-degree heat, stripping off the decayed plaster and applying 40 liters of white paint. Dermel's own account captured the spirit of the project when he wrote, "The sun beat down on us while we put on 40 liters of white paint, turning the igloo back into its pristine shape. We did not weather it ourselves, since we knew the desert would do that for us in due course. What the desert giveth, the desert also taketh away." A 2013 study led by Ralph Lorenz of Johns Hopkins documented a 21-foot-high sand dune advancing roughly 15 meters per year toward the nearby Mos Espa set, which amounts to about 10 times faster than comparable dunes on Mars. Original 1977 filming areas have already been consumed by sand. Tourism took a devastating hit after the June 2015 Sousse attack, which killed 38 foreign tourists and led to a loss of about 35% of Tunisia's tourism revenues by 2016, with 100 hotels shutting their doors. Recovery has been gradual, and the Tunisian Tourism Authority now collaborates with Star Wars fan clubs to draw visitors back. Galaxy Tours operates as the sole Lucasfilm-approved tour operator in the country. Our final stop takes us to the Tabernas Desert in Almeria, in southern Spain, a landscape widely recognized as Europe's only true desert with under 250 millimeters of annual rainfall. Sergio Leone chose this terrain to reinvent the Western, and the sets his crews left behind became an industry unto themselves. The most famous one, now called Mini Hollywood or Oasis, went up in 1965 as Yucca City, designed by Italian production designer Carlo Simi for Leone's For a Few Dollars More. Filming of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly followed the next year on the same grounds. The budgets across Leone's Dollars trilogy climbed fast, from about $200,000 for A Fistful of Dollars to $600,000 for A Few Dollars More to $1.2 million for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, with the 3 films combining for a gross of roughly $35.6 million. Clint Eastwood later reflected on what those films accomplished when he observed, "I think the Leone films changed the style, the approach to Westerns. They made the violence and the shooting aspect a little more larger than life, and they had great music and new types of scores." On set, Romani extras reportedly gave him a nickname of their own, El Payo del Cigarro, which translates to Whitey with the cigar. At peak production activity, as many as 14 Western villages dotted the Tabernas landscape. Only 3 survive in any operational form. Mini Hollywood was purchased in 1974 by Catalan hotelier José María Rosell and converted into a tourist attraction that draws a reported 200,000 visitors annually. A second set, Fort Bravo, also known as Texas Hollywood, changed hands around 1977 when stuntman Rafael Molina and horse trainer Francisco Ardura bought the property for roughly $6,000 and turned it into what's now the largest Western set in Europe, still hosting active film productions. The third survivor, Western Leone, built in 1968 for Once Upon a Time in the West, is the smallest and most neglected of the 3, with several buildings fenced off because they're structurally unsafe. Recognition arrived in 2020, when the European Film Academy awarded the Tabernas Desert Treasure of European Film Culture status. Miami Herald journalist Rex Reed once dismissed the entire region as a hellhole full of sand and snakes. The sets probably took that as a compliment. Every location on this list survived for the same underlying reason, and it had nothing to do with careful preservation planning. DeMille's Egyptian city endured because burying plaster cost less than shipping it. The Pariah set held together because BLM volunteers put in labor that no studio budget covered. Old Tucson keeps limping forward because Pima County cannot bring itself to demolish Arizona's Hollywood history. The Lars Homestead stands because Star Wars fans crowdfunded repairs that no studio ever offered to pay for. And Almeria's ghost towns persist because a hotel magnate in 1974 spotted a business opportunity where Hollywood saw nothing but scrap lumber. The desert serves as both preservationist and demolition crew. Give it another 50 years, and sand and sun will likely finish what the studio started. If any of these places caught your attention, drop a like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments which set you'd want to visit before it disappears for good.